welcome everyone as you're starting to log in there. We just get a little note of how many people are joining us at this point. So we're up to 15, 16, 17, so we're expecting 100 or so. So just bear with us for a moment while we give a chance for everyone to connect. And then we'll do a little introduction in just a second. In the meantime, Chris, how are you?
Yes, all is good. All is good. I'm slightly surprised that it's Wednesday. I don't know about anyone else, but
yes,
I haven't caught it up yet.
Yes, still trying to get back into the swing after the Easter break and the school holidays. And what day of the week is it?
It's that problem, isn't it? In the job of training, when you're training people of school and education age, you either have an Easter break and you do that and you decide that's what you're going to do, or you work like crazy because it's available and you can. And I've had a bit of both. I was trying to spin all those plates, and I just haven't stopped. It's been mad.
So the days blend into one then, don't they?
Yeah, it's all caught up. But no, it's good. I'm enjoying myself at the moment as I get to share today, which is lovely, because otherwise I'm sat at my office all on my own.
Super. Thank you. We just got a little chat message there. Thank you, Jean. Hi, I'm Jean. Good. We love a little bit of interaction. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the chat box and reactions and things that you can interact with shortly. So our numbers seem to have hit a more static point now. So we'll make a start, I think, and then folks obviously can join us at any time. Just to let you know, these sessions are recorded, so you can obviously review this session at a later date. If there's anything you hear today that you think, oh, that was good, but you haven't had a chance perhaps to make a note of it, you can always look at it again normally takes a week or so before we get it live on our YouTube channels. Just to give our YouTube channels a quick plug there, perhaps there's two actually. There's the DIA Academy channel, and then there's just the regular DIA channel. So what I would recommend you do, folks, is perhaps subscribe there to those two channels, and then anytime we do upload a video, then you'll obviously get a notification. So the DIA one, Chris has been on the Motor Mouth sessions, which you may well be aware of. So that gets loaded onto the DIA channel. These webinars get loaded onto the DIA Academy channel. Okay. Super. So I'm Kevin Martin, as you can see on the screen there. So I'm fairly new to the DIA, looking after the training side of things and organising these webinars. So really enjoying my time here, just on a part-time basis. Chris will introduce himself in a moment to those that perhaps aren't already familiar with Chris. And this little session, of course, is about trying to help our pupils. The best way we can help our pupils who maybe have a special educational need. So I trust it's going to be, or I know it's going to be very informative, and you're going to get something from it today. If you've never done one of these webinars before, let's just have a quick chat about some of the things you might see along the bottom of your screen. So, for example, we've got reactions. So if I just click on a laughing emoji there, you'll see it just sort of float across the screen. If Chris cracks one of his super jokes, you can click on that and pretend that you're laughing.
with me, not at me, please.
Oh, okay. Yes. Oh dear. Or there's another sort of face that's come up there, and that's it. Some of you are getting into that. So as we go through the presentation, feel free to interact that way, folks. All right, you can do that. There's a Q&A box as well. So feel free to fire over the questions, and we'll try and pick those up as we go along if we can. Or we might park some of them until the end of the session. We'll just review that as we go along. I've also got a couple of poll type questions. So let's start with that, shall we? So I'm just going to post one of the poll questions here for you to respond to, just to get an idea of what your existing confidence levels are with regards to how you feel about supporting one of your learners with an SEN, special educational need. So you've got sort of on a scale of 1 to 10, would you like to click on which one of those you feel is most relevant for you? And then we'll ask a similar question at the end of the session as well, just to perhaps get a little bit of an idea of any sort of learning that may have taken place. Or obviously we're trusting the aim of the session, you'll feel more confident about all of this, albeit just a short session. But Chris will be telling you about how you can perhaps get in contact with him beyond today if you need further support. But without further ado, though, let me hand over to Chris now, because Chris is going to take the lead from this point. And welcome to you all, and thank you for logging in. We hope you enjoy. Over to you, Chris.
Awesome, thank you. I can't currently do anything while the poll's on the screen.
There we go. I've just ended it.
So I'll hold off clicking anything until then.
Okay. I think you should be all right now. I've just ended it, Chris. Is it
lovely? Okay, yeah, no, yeah, I can clear that now. But just have a quick look at it. So we are, 47% 3 to 5s, 34% 6 to 8s, a few at 3%. They're my challenge, because I want to introduce something they don't know. That's always the aim, isn't it? When you're doing these things, find a golden nugget. Although equally, saying that you're doing it right is nice. I like that bit of reassurance. And we've got some at 0 to 2, 16%. And do you know what? That's the thing with the industry. I think the theory is really under supported, and we're not trained very well in it as we come into the process, and we're not necessarily given the skills that we need. We're shown in the car stuff, but not necessarily the theory stuff. So that's where I kind of came into things. So I will just share some bits on the screen, because one of the big things that I have learnt in doing this is the importance of having some visuals for certain people. And obviously we don't know who's in the room. If you've got any questions as you go, or if there's something you want to make sure that I've included, then yeah, please, feel free to pop it in the box, and I'll rely on Kevin, because I'm not good at multitasking.
No, you do the talking, Chris. I'll keep an eye on that.
Shout out. But yeah, please, if there's something specific you want to make sure that I kind of get in there, pop it in and I will do my best. And if I can't, I'll try and come back to you later. So yeah, not a problem at all. So I was a proper driving instructor. I keep being told by instructor. I've still got the badge, honestly. I should have it here to wave. I might put it in the corner of my screen. I was out doing the job for you can have a nose of what I do and everything else. But I'm now an instructor without a car. COVID came along. My car lease, I was lucky. Car lease came to an end right at the beginning of COVID, so I didn't have some of the concerns that I was supporting other people with. I was really lucky with timing, and I decided that I wasn't going to go back to being in the car, because I discovered the amount of support that was needed for the theory, and I thought I was good at it. I used to spend time in the car going over theory bits. We'd go and we'd kind of split a session and go to somewhere with Wi-Fi and sit and do some revision questions. And I thought I was quite good. Now, if I look back, I'd scratched the surface, and what I learn every day. I'm still learning. And I started doing this stuff mid-COVID, but people weren't interested. They were locked away. They weren't allowed to do the theory. So why work towards it? So it wasn't kind of the opportunity that I thought there might be. But I've been able to do a lot of work inside of it, and I have learnt tons, which I am hoping to share with you today. I'm just so you know, I'm selecting bits out of a presentation. So if I jump between screens a couple of times, I'm not hiding stuff from you. I'm just finding the right slide, because I want to be able to answer your questions as they come up. But we're going to start with a test. Now, we could have warned everybody, but you wouldn't have turned up, would you? Because nobody likes a test. So we're going to start with 5 questions. You've got about 30 seconds to just run through them. Just make sure that you can answer all of those, please. Just to clarify, because I used an abbreviation that you may not understand, which is MCQ, multiple choice questions. There we go. Okay, so how easy was that? Obviously, as professional driving instructors, you knew all of those answers. The point is, we haven't done the session yet, and hopefully, as we cover things, you might have been able to draw off prior knowledge. You might know how many multiple choice questions there are, but the other things you won't have experienced. That's how we do the theory test. we say, go and revise what you haven't learnt yet. And then we expect people to be successful. Sorry, just gonna move that out of the way. So the biggest issue we have is that we focus on revision, not learning. And that's the stage at which I think, driving instructors can do a bit more, even if it's to point people in a different direction. The reason that I find people fail, and when I say fail, the average pass rate is two, maybe 3 attempts. It's 40. I think it's currently about 46%. I've given up keeping track because, do you know what? It doesn't matter. People are either passing or they're not, and I'm doing the best for the individual. I feel the same about the practical test. So the people that I often get coming through, and it's slowly changing to getting new people who haven't done the test yet, the people I get coming through have often failed double figures. So the average is probably 6 to 8. The highest I've had is 23. Frustratingly, then didn't want to invest in success and wanted to go and keep revising. And I haven't heard back. But those are the people that I, that get in touch. So why do people fail? They don't know how to study. They lack the resources. They don't put the effort in. We've all met those. Now, that might be for a reason. They might have failed so many times at other things that they're scared. They're protecting themselves from that failure again. They know it's going to be difficult, so they'd rather not do it. And I think we have to remember that sometimes. They might have a gap in knowledge or in their understanding, or they might struggle with reading and writing, or the technical language. We take it for granted. We are dealing with a technical subject of the words of which are really normal. And an example of that, MSPSL. Driving instructors talk about it as if it's normal language and it makes sense to everybody. I hate it with a passion. Look, tell, do. And I keep to that. I'll talk to you about that another day if I haven't already. But the MSPSL is a technical language. We shouldn't expect people to understand it straight off the cuff. So sometimes avoiding technical language is good. When it comes to the theory, if they don't understand it, they can't answer the questions. So where we will simplify things in the car, it actually can cause them a problem. And we're going to have a look at a few of those. I like solutions, and they have diagnosed or undiagnosed additional needs. I like solutions. So the areas of looking at to solve things is improving knowledge, understanding, and comprehension. And normally where people fail, it's something to do, inside of that. And they're really broad categories. But they, our aim today is to give you some of those skills to take you through that process and hopefully give you a better understanding of what's what. Before I do that, the people in the car are individuals. We don't put them in boxes, but their labels do. We don't put them in boxes, but we go, well, you're like the ones that I had before, so I'm going to work with you in that way because it'll probably work. It's okay to, and then we cater to the individual. So not everybody's going to fit the models that I talk about. I'm going to generalize. I never apologize for that because it makes our life easier if we generalize. We use MSPSL. It's not always appropriate. So yeah, any issues there, if you've got a specific, again, feel free to get in touch. I quite, I enjoy helping people. I quite happily will talk about an individual basis or case to see if we can help. So bear with me. The non-specific educational needs. So when people haven't got a diagnosis, it's important to remember that we are not qualified to give one. We might look at them and, in air quotes, say, oh, they look, they're coming across, not look, but they're coming across with traits that make me think they might be dyslexic, that they're showing traits of autism, because then we can draw from our skill set related to that, but we're not diagnosing them. A phrase that I like, because as we know, sometimes people don't like to disclose. And people who are dyslexic, particularly, don't necessarily class it as a special need in a way. They it's a real kind of contention. Some do, some don't. That a phrase that is really useful can be, oh, something that helped one of my pupils who was dyslexic, and just drop it in, because they might then go, oh yeah, I am, and give them the opportunity to put the hand up. And I think sometimes we need the opportunity to put our hand up and go, yeah, that's me. So yeah, it's important not to point fingers. I suppose that's what I'm really saying. But if we look at the general stuff, additional needs include, from this theory focused, but this is this very similar to in the car: reading, writing, comprehension, processing, memory, and translation. And by translation, there's two types of that. It might be English as a second language, the literal translation, but actually it's about taking the words that are on the screen, working with them to figure out what they are asking and what they mean. Now, that probably comes under areas of reading, writing, comprehension, processing, and memory. But it's that conversion bit that is often missed, or gets lumped in with the others, so it gets missed. So I like to include it as a separate bit of the process. They might understand the words, but do they understand the meaning behind them?
When you say translation, Chris, if I could just ask, what is that? An example of that, perhaps, translation?
Just understanding what they're trying to get at. Trying to, so the individual words all make sense, but why the question? What's there? So especially if someone can't read and write, a challenge for everybody: have a go at the theory test, but you're not allowed to look at the screen. You can only listen to it. Some of those questions are really challenging, and you need to find ways, coping strategies, to work through breaking down that question into manageable bits. I often quote the book, The Magic Number 7 ± 2, which is a really good book for those that like books. And I believe it's on audiobook, which is my preference. So the magic number 7 ± 2, it just means that 5 to 9 bits of information is all that we've got capacity for. And under stress and pressure, that goes down from anywhere from 0 to 3. So if you're throwing big questions and big answers at people who cannot read and take that information off the screen, or have memory issues or processing issues, we need to find ways to break that down. So while they've heard the words, they don't necessarily work it out. To put it in a better way of answering your question, to put it in a practical context in the car, you can tell them what the pedals do, but do they actually understand it? They may still stall when you go to move off. And we all know the solution to that is get an automatic. So that was a joke, just to clarify. So I picked my your drink.
Go for the reactions. Oh, look at all the laughing there, Chris.
Yeah, good. So at least we know it's working. Whether it's with me or at me, that's fine. So looking at that difference in in the difference between telling and understanding, that's the translation bit. If they've read the words, but are they actually working it through? Yeah.
It might just be a good moment, Chris, do you think, to load the other little poll here, just to find out what folks currently do. So just a bit of more interaction there, ladies and gents. So if I just launch another little question for you: how do you currently support your SEN pupils with theory training? You got 4 options there. I don't. They do it themselves. Number 2, just suggest they read the highway code and do practice tests. Number 3, spend time with them at the end of the driving lesson. Or fourthly, I provide additional resources and one-to-one support outside of practical lessons.
While people are answering that, I think this is relevant, and I will cover some of this, to Michael's question in the Q&A box, which is that many of under 30s seem to think that the app is, excuse my box coming across, I need to move it, is what they use, and they don't actually read the code. We'll come to that bit in a second. Do you think the latest versions from the DVSA, which is the app, helps or hinders people? Sorry, I trashed your question slightly there in my reading skills, but I got the point across, hopefully. So I think that the problem is the apps are revision. And actually, people can probably see the results on the screen, because the way that I'm sharing my screen, because I'm on a Mac, actually shows it on there. I think the revision questions, it's important to remember that all of the apps with the DVSA questions have got the same questions. There's no point in using multiple apps in that case. And it's about revision. I would say reading the highway code is learning. However, if you can't read and write, or if you're not able to process that information or work with memory, then that's not a good way to engage with that. And I don't like read the highway code as an answer, because that is knowledge, not understanding. So having had a look through there, in case any of the last 5 people want to click, say most people spending some time at the end of the driving lesson, which is brilliant, and providing resources. But we've got, if we look at percentages, about 75% that are engaging with it in some way themselves, and 25% that aren't. And this is out of people that are turning up to, webinars and training, not necessarily the people that aren't. So if we look at the industry as a whole, there's a big difference there. So am I right to stop that one now?
Yeah.
Good.
Has it gone now?
No, but let me
share results. I clicked on that one. Stop sharing.
Right. I'm hoping I've messed up your. No, it's come back again. Can you clear it off your screen, because then it might disappear off mine?
I've removed it off of mine now. Yeah.
Okay. Let me try again. There we go.
All gone.
I love technology. You wouldn't believe I do all my training on Zoom, and I'm quite good at it using Zoom, but it's still it still baffles me sometimes. So some of the other additional needs that are in there, that you will see some of these in the car, be familiar with these, lefts and rights. I just want to talk through why when we have a look at dyslexia particularly. Increased and reduced, a quick tip for increased and reduced. I'm just going to do that for a second. If you make the I for increased, you are pointing upwards. If you make the R, you're pointing downwards. So if people are struggling with that, just simple. This is kinesthetic learning. So this is putting an action to it to help them remember. The other ones are, if you make the circle O for order, for the order signs, the triangle, you can open it up to make a W for warning. So these are ways that you can help them remember it by linking these things together. If you ever get a pupil in the car, I know we're not doing practical, but this is a nice one. If they forget what the first thing they've got to do is, make the first thing they've got to do touch their nose. So if we're going manual, so if it is clutch down and they keep forgetting, right, what do I do first? Because that's just stress getting in the way. Make it something really memorable. So touch your nose, put the clutch down. They will remember every time. You'll see lots of drivers doing this, but they'll remember every time, and they'll do it, and then you'll be able to get it in there. So make it an action to remember the sequence, and we can do that in all sorts of things. It's like tying a knot in the handkerchief. But I'll go back in my theory box now. I'll leave the practical to you. There we go. That's getting in the way now. There we go. Missing keywords out, so they are scanning and summarizing the questions and memorizing answers. So one of the issues, and if anyone from theory test land is listening, it's something I keep raising with people, is that the questions are always in the same place. Sorry, the answers are always in the same place. So learners use situational memory of where it sits, in on the screen, locational memory. So they go, when it's this question, it's the top left one. They don't know what that is. They don't understand it, but they remember where it is because they've done so much revision. This is why revision and learning need to be separate. So much revision, but they still don't understand. And that's, I go back to square one when I'm working on it. And often they are right, just not the DVSA right. And we've all read some of those questions. I will constantly criticize the DVSA's ability to write questions until they do it better. They won't let me look at the questions. And this is the other thing to remember. We see the revision data bank. We don't see the actual questions. So there's only a couple of people that ever see those real questions, the people who write them. And therefore they don't get assessed for, are they SEN friendly, and therefore friendly for all the rest of us as well. Because if you can get it across to someone who has potentially a lower level of understanding when it comes to literacy, then we'll all be okay as well. So yeah, it would be lovely if we could get more action.
There might be a good point just to link in with a question there from Pam on that note. Chris, I don't know if you can see it, but it says, so if there are recognised issues for people understanding a multifaceted question, why are the DVSA not amending the questions to enable people to understand the questions easily?
They are. Things that you will notice if you go through, there's more pictures coming in. So they are slowly adapting. The one that they're very interested in, they're quite engaged with on a DVSA level, which is, in my experience, listening and then not necessarily acting because it's a slow moving machine if it moves, but they are listening on are people who are deaf or hearing impaired because their pass rate is really low. One of the reasons for that, and they're not actually someone that I've got listed on here because it is a very specific need, but I don't know if it really sort of gets included under SEN when we're talking in this way, but deaf language, so sign language, BSL is a language in its own right, and it doesn't have the same words. There is no sign for catalytic converter. So if we didn't have the words for catalytic converter, how would they ask the question? But they still ask it of people who are deaf. So if they've got issues reading and there's no sign for catalytic converter in sign language, they will spell catalytic converter. I can't sign. I want to learn, and I keep trying to. My 6-year-old is currently teaching me. So I'm learning little bits along the way, which is great. And I've taught someone who's profoundly deaf, and she's passed the theory, and she was really successful. It was great. So, if you sign it and they can't spell, that's not helpful. That doesn't work. But there's a lot of restrictions in place. So really good question, Pam. Please write to the DVSA and ask, because the more people that do, the better. And I think, it is trying to make the questions more accessible. If you come across a question when you're doing, and remember, we've only got the revision questions, but you come across a question that doesn't make sense, flag it up. Because the more times people do that and go, this really isn't working for whatever reason, try and find why. If you're not sure why, have a chat with me and I'll see if I can shed some light on it. Because sometimes it's just our understanding. We're going to come to that as well. So, specific ones. So what I'm talking about is educational needs that have a title. We often know the titles. I'm going to talk about the really common ones, but I know that, Kevin, you've got a drivers with diverse needs for the practical coming up, which is also going to cover some of these.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so we're looking at revamping the previous version that we had. So on 25th of May, we're doing the practical workshop. That's obviously just initially here at Crawley, but we may in future, if it goes well, try and offer it out on Zoom as well. But
no, there's no ifs in Zooms that I'm on. It's always when. Always when. It's not if I pass, it's when I pass. Yes. So yeah, so I'm sure there will be lots of information there, and we are having a bit of an overview today. But it's, again, everyone's an individual. Sorry, Pam said that there are no BSL examiners in the DVSA. That's when you are still allowed an interpreter. And I think the problem with BSL is it is very open to You've got to be good at it to have that communication there. And I think, they have done a lot of steps. There's a deaf pack that you can get hold of. If you just Google DVSA deaf, I think it is just deaf pack, but I think it comes up.
Yeah.
Which is good for if you're teaching, you can have cards that you use. But the best thing is share your strategies with the examiner. They will talk to you in advance quite happily, and you can give them, this is what I do with this pupil. And just to clarify something, tapping them on the arm to get their attention is perfectly acceptable as long as it's agreed. I don't mean punch them. We're not playing the yellow car game, but getting their attention to give them an instruction as long as it's agreed is fine, even on a standards check. So just to clarify, because it's a question that comes up surprisingly often when I'm talking about deaf people. So common diagnosis: dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, which was ADD, ASD, which is autism. Asperger's doesn't technically exist anymore because it's been put under autism, but you will still get people who've had a diagnosis of Asperger's, and it's quite a useful one to know about. And then memory processing issues. These are the ones that I find affect the theory most. So let's have a quick run through what's what. So dyslexia. I'm fascinated by dyslexia at the moment. And although I have said I now go to a local dyslexia association meeting every month. I recommend it to all instructors, but they're a little bit sensitive to commercial people going in. So I recommend speaking to them first. So having gone along, I have, very, 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 in a very friendly way, accused them of it being contagious, because actually I did a test the other day, and it was ticking so many boxes for me. When people were saying, this is my issue, I was going, do you know what? So they gave me a test to do. And when I went along, it was for professional interest. Now I'm kind of going, I tick a lot of those boxes. So possibly undiagnosed dyslexic, losing words, struggling to find the right word, so ending up with a different one, which might change the meaning. That can happen a lot, and it's something I struggle with.
Me too.
I think I should have said this before you said that, but I think it can also be age related. My beard is getting grayer by the day, but it's something I've always had an issue with, and it is a friend of mine did a brilliant thing. She works with specific needs. She did, and used to be a driving instructor. And she did a brilliant thing where you have a conversation with someone, but you're not allowed to use the letters S or R in the conversation. Have a go. That's what it's like to be dyslexic when you're searching for words because you can't find the one that you want because it's on the tip of your tongue. Works really well, and will probably now be in the DIA practical drivers with diversity. It's a brilliant one. It really works.
Is it copyrighted?
I don't think so, but speak to Ian Brett's wife Amy.
Chat about that afterwards.
I stole it from her. So trying to find words is really important. But the thing I've learned, which really changed the way that I see dyslexia, is dyslexics, and I've been working with a PDI who's heavily dyslexic, and we've had some amazing conversations about it. And
IDP,
it's being open to it. It's having those conversations. Is they see the world, their internal map of the world is in 3D. So if you think about the classic of mixing up D and B, it's the same letter. It's dependent on where you're looking at it from. Yeah. So if you manipulate the world in 3 dimensions, it's not a D and a B, it's the same thing. So I had this fascinating conversation with one of my pupils. Kevin, you can talk to me, so I'm going to talk to you because I appreciate everyone else is busy typing. Oh no, it's going to be the whole DIA thing of.
The background.
Here we go. I'm going to
get. There's a "you must turn left" sign.
Okay, lovely. I'm glad you scanned it because I don't know how long I could keep it on the screen for. I'm going to try hard. Oh, look, if I do that, that works.
In front of you.
I didn't think about that, did I? So you must keep left. Which way is the arrow pointing?
Well, to me, it's going to the left. but it could be mirrored on Zoom.
But yeah, but as far as the arrow is concerned, it's pointing right. If you tell me, if imagine I'm facing you, tell me to go left, you're going to point right.
True.
Yeah. Now, someone who is dyslexic sees both of those or neither of those at the same time. So when they're in the car and they're struggling with lefts and rights, this is why. Because it depends. The left and right spins with them. It's not fixed. Interestingly, I've spoken to a couple of people who did things on stage. They never had an issue with the stage left, stage right, because they had different names and they never moved. They were fixed. So it didn't matter which way they were facing. That was that one and that was that one, a bit like north, south, east, west. But the left and right moves with you because it's your left and right. We get taught about our hands. We do the L thing, or if you are right-handed, it's, you know, you write with your right and the other one's left over. So, you know, that doesn't work if you're left-handed. So it is, you know, it's understanding that can really help in when they're planning routes. And then you get the add-on with people who are dyslexic, which often gets put under Erlin syndrome, but there's a big debate inside of the dyslexia world as to whether it is just visual stress or whether it comes under visual stress rather than being a separate thing. There's a couple of industry driving instructor industry experts on Erlin syndrome. It's seeing straight lines. So if you're thinking about the page, they don't see that line. It's just a swirl of letters, literally. But also I've had it in the car where they can't see the straight lines on the road. So you put that into a driving context, it's a real challenge. So I think dyslexia is bigger than we think it is, and it comes up a lot. When it comes to the theory specifically, processing, and dyslexia is a processing issue. It's not a reading, writing issue. It's a processing issue, and it's a memory issue. I think that's the diagnosis of dyslexia sits around the processing and memory, and then the others are symptoms of it. So when we're dealing with questions on the screen, you've got someone who potentially can't read, someone who potentially doesn't understand specific words because they struggle with that and has memory issue. It's a real challenge. So it's finding ways to help them work through. Some of that will be by doing things with your hands to put actions to it, or making it visual, like having the presentation on the screen. I also work with people who don't read and write at all. And I always apologize to them for it, but kind of justify it. I still write stuff because then when they take it away, other people can help them and it makes sense. Right. The picture in its own right doesn't always, so especially when I've drawn it. So yeah, being able to work through things like that with dyslexia is really important. Dyspraxia is is physical dyslexia in a way. If you are dyslexic, I think it's 40% chance of you having another diagnosis as well, likely to ending in ear and be complicated to spell because irony is not dead. It's like lisp, isn't it? And things like that. It always seems to be, we give them the most challenging word. But dyspraxia is it used to be called clumsy child syndrome in the days that we didn't understand these things. And it affects more than just coordination from a practical perspective, feet and hand issues, but it's also all of those things that affect dyslexia because it is memory, it's processing. They can be slower to learn, often kinesthetic, but not good at being kinesthetic. So they learn through doing, but then they're slower at doing. That could be really frustrating. So from a theory perspective, I tend to approach it the same way as I do dyslexia because it ticks the right boxes for me. In the car, be aware it might be different. And I can't then remember what's next on the list, so I will just share again.
I'll just chuck out a quick question there as well.
Yeah.
Then that's while you're reloading. Oh yeah, it's up on the screen now.
Yeah, go for it.
Where's it gone? Disappeared. I think there was a thought about if somebody isn't that great at reading, should we really be how safe are they going to be on the road? How will you respond to important safety issues that are given on signs? Should they actually be driving, or are we helping or hindering by enabling these people to pass?
Yeah, I think in a grown-up adult conversation, which I think we should all be able to have as professionals, I think it's a really valid question. I have seen the changes that I've been able to be part of to people's lives, where potentially they're driving using joystick or head movement. You would probably be scared as someone who can fully operate a manual car in how this car is being controlled, but it's perfectly safe and fine, and the stats back that up. So I did the course at the Queen Elizabeth Foundation in Bensted. There are others at different mobility places around the country, but the QEF do a specific ADI course, which is 2 days long. And they're revamping that, and I think they're running it 4 times a year now. So there's availability to look at that is dedicated to that. And then John Rogers at the Disability Driving Instructors runs courses about teaching people with disabilities as well. And they've got lots of free information at DDI, Disability Driving Instructors. So, and John, he's going to retire. Get him now. Suck all of the information out of him, because it will take a long time, and use it, because he is an absolute asset to the industry, and we don't want to lose him. So he won't retire. No instructors really retire, do they? So I think that how often during your day does reading actually matter if you've got a sat nav? If you can recognize what the basic signs mean, that red is danger. And, you might end up getting yourself into a situation you've got to get out of, but I don't think you're going to increase risk. So I'm fully on board with everybody who is capable of passing the driving test, which is a minimum standards test, which allegedly keeps us all safe. If they can reach that criteria, brilliant. Can they pass the theory test? They really struggle in a lot of cases. And therefore, it ends up being a barrier that I don't think it should be. But I think, it just depends. And also, if you look at your average 17-year-old male compared to someone who's got an additional need, who is going to value the ability to get around because they might not have the mobility and everything else, that it's going to mean more to them, which one's going to be safer? And we happily give these statistically, it's a range, but with statistically dangerous people car keys, to the point at which, depending on which stats you look at, 20% of them go and crash. So we're not training them necessarily to a level where they don't crash. We're training them to a level where not enough of them crash. Then I would often rather be in the car with one of these people who has got an additional need, has had to work harder, and it means more, because I think they're going to be more sensible inside of what they're doing. So if I run through the rest of the list, I'm just aware of time. ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, was attention deficit disorder, but that's an out-of-date phrase. People get caught up on the hyperactivity and the attention deficit, and actually they are hyper-vigilant. They are seeing everything going on, but they lack focus and they struggle with time. It's as if time isn't there. So if anyone has seen the Disney film with the squirrel, it's a bit like working with someone like that sometimes. The distraction is there. It's the pull away is stronger than the pull towards. But the title gives you a really bad explanation of what it is. When you're working with someone who has ADHD, you've got to keep it going, keep it snappy, keep them focused, and try and make it as simple as possible. And it often goes hand in hand with some of those other issues. People who are autistic really struggle with the theory test, because their black and white version of things doesn't necessarily match the grade that's given by the examiner. Teach them the rules and they'll be brilliant drivers. When things then suddenly change, they need to be able to adapt, and that's where they can struggle. Same in the theory test. They will know the rules, but drawing it out of English language can be challenging. say Asperger's does not exist now technically. It's under autism, but that tends to be more of a social challenge. It's the social skill side of things. I don't have as many people with Asperger's struggling with the theory as I do from the general spectrum. It's an interesting thing because it is a massive thing. It works in all different directions as well. Memory and processing issues, learning by rote. Anyone that struggled with by rote on the part 1 is repetition. Get them to understand it and they'll be able to answer the different questions, because it's one of the challenges we haven't really touched on, is that the actual questions are different. So that comes up a lot, is that the questions are different. So what do the DVSA do to help? Because I know, Pam sort of touched on that earlier. The things you can get, everybody can get voiceover. Now, I was told the other day, and I'm trying to check into this, that you can turn it on and off now on your own when you take the test. Now, I don't know if that's correct. So I'm not sure what the correct information is about this. But previously, you've had to book it. When you book, you just hit the tick box, you get the voiceover. I love the voiceover, but again, possibly undiagnosed, who knows what, because I've not been tested for anything. And so that might be why. But the voiceover, I find, if someone's reading it to me, I'm less likely to miss a word out or make an assumption, because I'm really audio. I like that approach. But anyone can have voiceover. British Sign Language on the screen. You have to remember, with British Sign Language, there are regional dialects. So that screen might not match your pupil very well, almost accents, if you like. And it's not very good on the screen. If someone needs BSL, ask for an actual interpreter to sit with them. I wouldn't bother with the BSL on the screen. It's less helpful than anything, because it only says what's in the question, whereas the person there can put a bit of interpretation. It is a language of pictures. So it's not about the words, it's about the pictures. And I am no expert, but I am a very interested party who has been very appreciatively accepted into a number of deaf communities that I'm now hopefully going to work with more. Extra time you have to apply for. So the rest of these you have to apply for. So you would tick the box to say, I need additional help, and then you would state what that help is, and these are the options. So extra time, you need evidence to show that you need it. A separate room, extra time they do in percentages as well. So some people get 25%, some people get 100%. A separate room. If you're going for the reader, recorder, or the OLM, or the interpreter, you get the separate room anyway. But you can just request a separate room if someone's high anxiety or ADHD, they get distracted. You can ask for that. Reader recorder does what it says on the tin, and most people who've got that have had it at school. So someone who can read the questions, but they can't change the questions. They are the questions that are there. The BSL interpreter is the human being version of the video on the screen. And you can't get a reader recorder and a BSL interpreter, which triggers some people, because it sounds like we're giving the deaf people less. It's because they are the reader recorder, but the DVSA in traditional terms don't communicate that well. So just before you get someone who's very upset, which I've had a few times now. The oral language modifier, better known as an OLM, is, although not known well enough, is the highest level of help you can get and is hard to get. They can manipulate the sentences and change them. They can change the wording. They're not allowed to change technical wording. And they are able to listen to what the pupil's saying and kind of nudge them in the right direction by going, what you've just said is that, but your words and their words are different. It depends on who you get as to how good they are. But I've had some real success with OLMs where people were failing multiple times. It can be a very useful tool. Hard to get though, really hard to get. And the OLM also has diagrams to try and explain some of the questions. So that can help as well, particularly if you've got someone who doesn't read or write. So yes, but as I say, disability driving instructors, they've got a free handout on teaching theory. If you get in touch with them, they, you know, lots of resources that are dedicated to needs, physical and cognitive. So yeah, definitely worth a look. So
Brilliant.
looking at where I start, because I'm the one that's doing it on a daily basis. It's what works for me, so that you can then kind of, you know, try and adopt some of it. I start with an introductory session that has how questions work. I then go through the words and the phrases and make sure that they understand what they mean. Then we look at how roads work. It's amazing how people can be test ready, whatever that means, test ready on the road, but not understand how roads actually work when we're doing it on paper. So that's really interesting. And then I work on foundation knowledge. So foundation knowledge is the shapes of the signs, is what lines mean. Solid lines mean you can't go through them. That's it. Make it simple. And then we can adapt from there. Flashing amber lights mean proceed if safe. So look at different types. It's not just the pelican crossing. Don't teach traffic lights. Forget pelican crossings, because all of them are the same except pelican crossings. But because we as instructors have a habit of going, different is dangerous, so I'm going to go and show you all of the exceptions to the rules instead of the rules themselves, people get confused. So, and say, there's a natural reason for doing that, because if we can show you the dangers, we can keep you safe. Start with the rule. Too often people start with the danger, and that causes that confusion. So they start with the different. So look at what is stable and it's based around. And roundabouts, I did a roundabout session last week for teaching roundabouts, and roundabouts are the biggest bunch of exceptions, but you can find the rules to work through. So, you know, definitely have a look at those. Looking at things that you could do in the car, looking at the practical specifically and how you can do that, you build in the theory to it. Use the theory or DVSA words. So we'll often try and make things simpler, but actually we make them more complicated. Junctions are emerging. Side roads are turning in. So you don't turn into a junction, you emerge from a junction. You turn into a side road. That's across the theory test. So try and use that. Looking at gradient. I hate it. Why don't we call it a hill? Because they don't on the theory test. So at least introduce the word gradient, show them what gradient is, because then it will make more sense. And my favorite one, douse. You douse a burn. So you pour water on it, but nobody except for Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean has said douse in a long time, or the odd fireman.
In my first aid course is douse.
Oh yes, sorry, yes, but this is why, because it's the first aid question. You douse the burn. So yes, and then my favourite one on the words, and this sometimes makes some instructors take a step backwards and kind of revisit what they think. Dual carriageway. So I'm not going to test anybody, and I know that Kevin knows the right answer because I've had this conversation before. And it's Kevin. He's very, very technically knowledgeable, so I wouldn't even dare. But define dual carriageway, because the answer I get from most people, including a lot of instructors, is that there will be 2 lanes, and there could be 1. In one of the theory test questions, there's 3, because they want to challenge you as to why it's different from a motorway.
Triple carriageway.
But it's the solid divider in the middle. That's the bit that makes it the dual. I always think about people jousting over a fence, because, you know, the visual's quite nice. So dual carriageway is divided roads by a central reservation. Doesn't mean that it's going to be a 70-mile-an-hour road, because locally I've got a 30-mile-an-hour high street that has a barrier down the middle, which makes it a dual carriageway. So understanding that is really important. When you're teaching, try to cover why. Examples of this, street lights. Street lights mean 30. If there are not street lights, on paper, it's not 30. There's exceptions, but we're working on rules. And therefore, we would put parking lights on. Has anyone ever done that? I don't think I've ever actually done that in my real life. You know, I've done it as a demonstration thing, but actually in real life, because we don't park in areas that aren't 30. Very rarely. So unless you know, something's gone wrong. So that doesn't necessarily make sense until it's been explained. So working that out is going to help them answer those questions. Providing support and structure, and inviting them to say, can we look at it? Ask them to send you one question a week for the next lesson that you can sit and have a look at, the one that they're struggling with. Get them to send it across, because that really helps. There is a danger there that you end up focusing on revision, not learning. But if we can find what they're revising and struggling with, we can do that. And please feel free to get in touch. More than happy to help. Somebody asked about, I think it was Michael, wasn't it, mentioned about apps and things. So just to share some of the ones that I recommend, there's lots out there. Things to look for, make sure they're the DVSA revision questions. Make sure that there's some AI, artificial intelligence, built in, not artificial insemination, which really confused my son when we were watching Clarkson's series 2, and they were talking about AI when they were inseminating cows. Yeah, AI has moved to a whole nother level now.
I think that deserved more than one laugh reaction. The
look on his face was horror. So yeah, make sure it's got AI built in, and make sure you can support them in whatever way. So my top resources are the one that I use, Theory Test Pro, because as an instructor, I pay for it, but I can see their questions and answers. So that allows me to know if they're working, know if they're struggling. And remember, if they're not working on it, there might be a reason. It's not always just laziness or disengagement or whatever it might be. So for me, Theory Test Pro works really well. I will name check Driving Test Success, who have also got an anytime option. So yeah, and you should, and if you don't, give me a shout. You should get discount if you use that code, because I told Theory Test Pro they were going on this list, so they had to give me something to benefit instructors. So yeah, if it doesn't work, let me know.
3 years old for Chris 2021.
Well, yeah, no, they changed their referral thing, but anyway, it's because it used to be that instructors who had Theory Test Pro would get a benefit. That hasn't come back. When it does, use their code, benefit the instructor that you know. Until that happens, that should give you some kind of discount. James May, who I had the pleasure of spending a day with, so I will name check because that's really cool. And he's a lovely guy. We did some filming for the app on the practical videos using a diorama, and no one except for James May can work with a diorama. And yeah, it was a great day. I learned about working to camera and things from him during that. It was brilliant. Possibly didn't appreciate as much as a lot of instructors would have, because I don't like cars and stuff, but anyway. The James May app, as an ADI or PDI, as long as you've got a PRN number, you can get a free copy for you to have a go with. Go to the James May website, fill in the form, they'll send you a link. Really popular with people who are dyslexic, the James May theory app. Check out the commentary on the hazard perception test, and that is a masterclass, in my opinion, of how to do a commentary on the hazard perception. It's brilliant, and it's very James May. Some people won't like it because it's very James May, but it's not bad. You can't see yet what the pupils are doing, so it is a standalone app for them. But it has got structure in it. It's nice. Safe Driving for Life, the DVSA official website. I slated it. Thought it was absolute rubbish. It has improved since, but what I hadn't seen, because it cost too much money in my view, was behind the paywall. It's really good. I say that, I would just put my hands up saying I'm consulting on that one as the DITC alongside DIA and the other NASP members. they're improving it. They're trying to make it better. It's one of the few options that does some teaching in there, so it's definitely worth a look. But I put my hands up to say, when I first saw it, was not impressed. But when you see behind the paywall, it's worth it. They have promised that they're going to give instructors a module that they can access and look at, so we can judge it for ourselves. So when that happens, I'm sure DIA will shout about that being available. Yeah, so it's good. It's also good for part one. We often forget part one, because that's where we learn how to do the theory badly. So let's try and make that better, and we might improve the industry. My mate Annie, who lives on TikTok, she seems to always be on there. Free live sessions, awesome. We share resources. She doesn't do one-to-one, so she sends me those people. She's got her own course on there. But the TikTok stuff is free. So, a lot of your pupils will be engaging in TikTok anyway. Let's make it, rather than silly dances at the side of the road, something that's actually educational. Or if you want to, you could do your own silly dance videos that teach the theory, because I'm not going to do them. Kevin, we'll see you outside the DIA head office later doing your little dance, I'm sure. And then my mate Terry from the Instructor podcast, which if you haven't listened to it, please do, because I think it's one of the best resources inside the industry, where a lot of the access is free if you like audio stuff. There's also some video stuff, but yeah, and he's a lovely bloke, and he's way underrated, I think, in how awesome he is. Genuinely, I wouldn't work with him otherwise. But 5 Minute Theory, I don't like him. 5 Minute Theory podcast. I don't know if he's here, he might be. 5 Minute Theory podcast is underrated. I know Terry's revisiting it, and we're going to do some more bits with that to try and revamp it. A number of my pupils have found it incredibly helpful, so they can listen to it between stuff. There is a list on the DITC about the theory test resources, so if you want to visit it or what have you, feel free. And then at the risk of it being a quick plug, but just to let you know what I do, there's me. I do one-to-one Zoom theory, and I do that. It's not under my driving school name, because I want to work with all of you guys. So if you're struggling, you've got someone who's struggling, I will dual brand happily, and I will give you feedback, and we can get you doing stuff in the car that's going to benefit their theory through that as well, having some really good success. So if you want to chat, feel free. It's also a way you don't have to pay for Theory Test Pro if you don't want to, which that's your choice, because I include it. So there's an option there. And then I did mention it in passing, the part one stuff. We set ourselves up to fail sometimes in this industry, and this is one of the cases where if someone talks to you about becoming a driving instructor, part one should be part of the learning to be an instructor process, not something that just gets done. So, if you don't want to get involved and you don't know a trainer, send them over and I'll point them in the right direction. But try and encourage them to actually learn the stuff, work with the resources as well. I've got some questions. I don't know how we are time-wise.
Yeah, we can have a little look at those perhaps as we start to wrap things up. If any of you need to go, obviously, then please do get off to your next lesson or whatever you've got to do. But somebody was asking actually if the session is recorded, which it is, because they joined a little bit part way through. So I'm just trying to see who it was that asked that question. It was Jenny. Yeah, Jenny. It is recorded. So on the YouTube channel, DIA Academy YouTube, you can catch up with bits you've missed. So she's found it helpful. So, and another lady, Christine Hudson, is saying thank you, Chris, because you've been working with one of her pupils, and they are happy.
Yes, I possibly part of the maybe dyslexia assessment raised the fact that I'm awful with names. So in this industry, when I know a lot of people online as well, I'm always going, I know that name, but I have to try and place where. So yes, yeah, no, absolutely. And I do. I really appreciate people that send their pupils across, and I treat them like they're my own and try to look after them all. So yeah, absolutely.
Oh, good. There's a couple of others that I could read out, but you finish your bit off, Chris, and then we'll do the questions at the end, shall we?
Yeah, absolutely. So these are just some of the questions that I use as examples, partly to show how potentially bad the questions are worded, but also to show some of the issues that come up. So I asked Kevin this one earlier. What colour are indicator lights? We could do a stick it in the comments if you fancy it, but at least answer it for yourself. The answer, as far as my pupil was concerned, green. The problem, he's correct. He was adamant about it, and we figured out why, just to let you process. And credit to Kevin, he got it straight away. It's when you put it on, that's what he sees in front of him is a green light. Mm. He sees it flashing. So when he sees indicators, it's green. So, you know, it shows you how sometimes you need to accept their answer as the truth. This is Gestalt learning for anyone that's doing it part one. Accept their version as the truth and work with it, because there's probably something in there that's going to help you. So, you know, your answer isn't necessarily the important one. It's bridging the gap between the two. Mm. So,
some face value.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing what you find when you dig into it. Like with the arrow, you know, seeing how someone sees things differently is really interesting. If you're driving in busy traffic and you want to pull up after a junction on the left, when should you signal? As you're passing or just after the junction? Just before you reach the junction? Well before you reach the junction? It would be better not to signal at all. Now, you have probably all got that picture in your head in some way or other. If someone struggles with reading or struggles with having pictures in their head and trying to convert the words into the pictures, they will not be sure where they're pulling up, potentially. We tend to prioritize a main road, nothing said, straight ahead, etc. If they haven't got that in place, they may be thinking they're going into the side road. One of the important rules I teach is if it's not in the question, it doesn't exist. You're not allowed to add to the question. So yeah, definitely something to think about there. Mm. One of my favorites is an official theory test question. You're turning right at a crossroads. An oncoming driver is also turning right. What's the advantage of turning behind the oncoming vehicle? Now, if you see the world in 3 dimensions and you're not sure where left and right is, my pupil yesterday, this question came up and he said he is autistic. He said, whose right is it? Doesn't tell you. It's a really confusing. All we needed was a diagram, because it said you're going behind. So we could show a diagram of that crossroads without giving anything away. And do you know what? As someone who is not diagnosed with anything, I struggle in taking that and going, well, hang on, who's where? So why are we making it difficult to touch back on the, should we be enabling or allowing people with different needs, whatever those are, should there be a cutoff? Then, we should, if there is a cutoff, it should be because of a real reason, not because they're struggling with words, turning it into something where they could give me a perfect answer, but they don't understand it.
It's like offside to offside, near side to near side. That's completely confusing for me as well as anybody else.
Yeah. near the curb, the side near the curb is near side and off. I just go driver to driver and passenger to passenger.
France.
Yeah, no, that's the thing, isn't it? It's really confusing. And then this next one is a bit of a coup from Annie Winterburn, TikTok lady, and myself, because we figured this one out, right? And I'm not quite sure that we're officially allowed to share it, because it's a real question, and we don't have real questions in the public domain. But we worked this one out. You are driving along a national speed limit dual carriageway. What will the speed limit be after you have passed this sign? So that's the actual question. I think it's a brilliant question. It's very well thought out. It requires a number of levels of understanding to work it through. And on this one, pop it in the chat. So answer it for me. You are driving along a national speed limit dual carriageway. what will the speed limit be after you have passed this sign? When it was coming through, we had it in bits from a number of different pupils. It suddenly came up. It was obviously introduced as a new question, and it was appearing lots. At the moment, I will just mention trailer questions. There've been a huge input of trailer questions, because if you remove the B+E test and you want to make sure that you've mitigated your risk, you tell people in the theory test they need to take professional training. I said it with a straight face and everything. So we won't get too political on that one, but there's a lot of it in the theory, so expect these theory trailer questions to come up. So what are we looking at on the chat? Because I can't see it, Kevin.
Lots of 60s and 70s. Some people saying still the national speed limit or until the central reservation ends.
Love that.
Yes, my thought would also be, well, it's not changing as you actually get to that sign. It's only going to change when you actually pass the actual type of road changes, which, because that sign could be 100 yards before the central reservation or whatever. But so
to break that down, and this is a room of professional driving instructors, and we're struggling because of the question. You know, hopefully in the situation we get it right, but because of the question. First thing you need to know is, what is the national speed limit on a dual carriageway? So the barrier in the middle on a national speed limit road makes it 70. So as you said, this sign may not be at where the barrier, it's a warning of up ahead. So it's not at that sign. So the question is actually wrong. Now, I will just say the actual DVSA question might be worded slightly differently, so it might be better. I don't think it is. I think that there is an issue there, because it says after this sign, and it's a question about the sign. So we know that when the dual carriageway comes to an end, it becomes a single carriageway, and that a single carriageway national speed limit is 60 miles an hour. So the answer would be 60, but there's a lot of caveats in there of going, is it at the sign? Is it the end of the barrier? You know, what else haven't they told me? So I think it's a lovely example of what we're working with when it comes to the theory and the challenges, and that is not easy. So if we're not finding that easy, if someone doesn't have the driving experience, and a lot of instructors are saying, well, look, get your theory done first because we need flexibility because of the waiting list and all of those factors, if they haven't got that level of experience, then there can be, you know, some real challenges in working these questions through. So I was just going to quickly pop my contact details on the screen, just so that if anyone does want to get in touch, they can. I've got a fancy app that puts all of these things into one place. So, and you can access it via my website. You can WhatsApp me and everything through there. So any of those bits, it will come to the same place, not an issue. Or you can scan the QR code, which will give you all of those details on your phone, because I'm trying to be as inclusive as possible. So yeah, or find me on Facebook, or get in touch with the DIA and they'll happily pass it on, I'm sure. So I like making you guys work, it's great. So if I come out of this, if everyone's got that now, I'm fairly easy to find. Stick me in Google, it'll be fine.
Review it when it's loaded up on the YouTube channel.
And any other bits?
Just scrolling through any other questions that I might have missed, actually. There's just a few sort of general comments. I'm just scrolling through here, sorry folks, but yeah, I think we did cover most of them as we went through. Apologies if we have missed any, but I'm just conscious of the time now. We're a little bit over our bit, but that's
you know me better than that. I can't not talk.
No, it's fine. It's all good. Lots of positive feedback there about how useful folks have found it. So thank you everyone for logging in. As I say, do review on the recordings. There are other courses coming up, so that we're trying to populate our DIA Academy with a variety of courses. We've got a mindfulness course that's been loaded up recently. So have a look at the DIA Academy website. I won't keep you now with listing them all out, but they're all on the website if you want to do some more CPD. And we'll be doing these webinars regularly, once a month, on a different topic each month. There's next in a couple of weeks' time, we've got one on mindfulness, which will help to plug our course that's coming up as well.
One of the questions on there that we didn't answer, which I would, if I can, just quickly cover.
Please do. Yeah,
it's important if you are teaching. Well, it doesn't matter which transmission you're teaching, unless you're being German and doing both. Because in Germany, if you do, I think it's 10 hours in a manual, you could pass in whatever, and you get to drive both. I think that's a better system. So if you are teaching manual, there are automatic questions that predominantly it's about kick down. Push the accelerator harder. It basically drops down a gear to relate it to manual. The world's too technical for that to be accurate now, but it's good enough. And there are a good number of questions about clutches, gears, and transmission. Remember, sometimes they need to know the wrong answer to be able to get rid of it. So transmission is rarely the right answer, if at all. I don't think it is. But if they don't know what that means, they can't get rid of it. So we sometimes need to go through wrong answers and explain why to be able to do that. But it was an anonymous question, so I don't know who it was. But yes, there are differences between the two. There is no separate automatic theory test, which I think is madness, because the gear questions are quite hard to teach if they've never experienced the gears. Trying to explain that is challenging. I tend to relate clutch, engine, and gears to the word control, because that's a quick link up. And then separately from that, steering, tires, and brakes to the grip and the road surface. And those tend to be connected. So if one comes up, it's normally one of the others that's the answer. And that can be quite helpful.
Brilliant. There was one here from Guy, actually. Hi, Chris. What do we ask the DVSA for to get the pupil of the OLM bit?
An OLM. I believe it says that on the list. So when you go into it to book the test, you go in. Sorry, I always avoid the word normally. You go in normally. You go in as you would normally. It's the normal thing. So and when you're working with people with SEN, the word normal can often trigger people. I always say normal is just a setting on the washing machine. The typical is a better word, and you'll often get neurotypical and neurodiverse. So those are technical words that are being used more and more and are kind of acceptable things. It's a bit like not using the word handicapped nowadays to give people an equivalent. You go into the system as you would normally to book a theory test, and it says, do you need additional help? Just to be clear about that, they call it additional accommodations, which sounds like you're booking a hotel room. So where if your SEN pupil is phoning up, it's option 2, which is additional accommodations. Because why can't they just call it help?
Additional accommodation, right? It's an Airbnb line. And just to close off, folks, I did have one last, which has disappeared off my screen. I was just going to do the last poll there. I don't know if you've still got a poll option on your side. Have you polls and quizzes? It's just disappeared on me. Right. It was just to get your, yes, I found it now. Sorry. That same question that we started with, just to see if you feel any differently. So those of you that are still there, I think there's 40 or so of you still online. Have a little go at that question, see if their confidence levels have gone up on this topic. It's looking good. All right. It says at the end of the session, how do you now feel about providing support to a learner with an SEN whilst they are preparing for their theory test? So yeah, we've got 46%, 6 to 8, 29% now in the 9 and 10. We had 16% earlier in the 0 to 2, only 7% now. So that's lovely.
And all I would say is, if you don't feel, a bit confident about it, find someone or something that does. So find a way around it and offer them that support. Because that's the biggest thing is being able to to point them in the right direction. We don't have to know the answers ourselves necessarily, signposting as they call it. But yes, absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Hope you found it useful. Thank you for clapping hands there. Brilliant.
Thank you, everybody.
And stay safe and have a good day, everyone. Bless you. All the best.